Okay? I don't exactly know. Let's keep moving. Back in Genesis 3, that's the time where Eve is standing in front of the serpent. The serpent convinces her that this tree is good for food, and then she eats, and then she gives some to her husband, and then he eats. And what I notice in that, a temptation, is that women might be tempted to relationship over righteousness. You can see, she just ate from the tree, right? What's the immediately first thing she does? She hands the fruit to her husband. Join me in this, regardless of whether or not you should, regardless of whether or not it's a good thing to do. Join me in this. She hands it to her husband. But the husband isn't free of guilt there. His temptation is this. He can take shortcuts. Men can take shortcuts. Think about what happens if Adam doesn't eat. God told him that the one who eats from the tree is going to die. What happens if Eve dies? He's all by himself again. What is he going to do? Watch all the animals again? Name them all a second time? Is God going to create new animals and he's got to go through that whole process one more time? God's got to put him to sleep. He's got to take another rib. What's it going to happen? This is much easier. I'm just going to eat this one now. Sometimes men can be tempted to take shortcuts. One last passage we're going to look at is in 1 Peter chapter 3. 1 Peter's way in the back of the Bible. I think I have the page number there. But I'm using a new Bible here and all the pages are stuck together. Come on. 1 Peter chapter 3. Check out what Paul says, what Peter says here. Wives, in the same way, submit yourselves to your own husbands, so that if any of them do not believe the word, they may be won over without words by the behavior of their wives when they see the purity and reverence of your lives. Your beauty should not come from outward adornment, such as elaborate hairstyles and the wearing of gold jewelry or fine clothes. Rather, it should be that of your inner self, the unfading beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit, which is of great worth in God's sight. For this is the way the holy women of the past who put their hope in God used to adorn themselves. They submitted themselves to their own husbands, like Sarah, who obeyed Abraham and called him her Lord. You are not her daughters. You are her daughters if you do what is right and do not give way to fear. Husbands, in the same way, be considerate as you live with your wives and treat them with respect as the weaker partner and as heirs with you of the gracious gift of life, so that nothing will hinder your prayers. See, what Paul is saying here, what Peter is saying here is that, first of all, there's often a situation where a wife believes and a husband doesn't. We live in that world today. There's often a situation where the wife is the first one to come to faith, and then it takes the husband a while later. Maybe that's the good side of what sometimes gets distorted about that whole heresy thing. But the good side is that quite often women are far more readily accepting of the fact that God is real and He made them and He wants a relationship with them and they can receive Jesus and receive forgiveness. Women seem to connect with that faster than men because we see that far more often. But he says, even in that case, even when the woman knows the truth and the husband doesn't, the way to draw the husband to God is not to manipulate or to coerce, or to command, or to nag, or to argue, but to submit. And that somehow in the purity and reverence of a life well lived and a gentle spirit, that draws the man into faith. So the temptation there for women is that women can be tempted to seek to manipulate, particularly manipulate men. Ladies, for most of you in this room, I would venture to say at some point in your life, you wore something on your body because you were trying to get a response from some guy. And it probably worked. Guys, that is just as much your fault as it is theirs. But the point is that there's a temptation that women can use what they've got to manipulate men. On the flip side, men can treat women as objects and not treasures. This last week I was reading a couple articles in the Atlantic Monthly and the Wall Street Journal and a couple other places. And they were talking about how in our society, men are dying out. Good quality men are dying out. And there's a circumstance that is being described as perpetual adolescence. where guys are trying to maintain their teenagehood perpetually. And the situation works like this. Guys hang out with their buddies. They watch movies like Hangover and Hangover 2 and things like that. And they play their video games, and they're living in this sort of adolescent, sow your wild oats sort of world. And the women are enabling it. Because the guy who can sow oats and has someone who's ready to reciprocate is just going to stay in that mode. There's no force on his life to get his act together and be responsible and take charge of a family and lead. And so, on the flip side, these articles are talking about how women are getting so disturbed with all the loser men they've been dating over the years that they go in one of two directions. Either they settle for a loser who's at least willing to be committed, or they eschew men altogether and say, forget it, I'm done with men in relationships, and I'm going to live a single kind of life, not a celibate life, but a single kind of life. And so these articles were talking about this problem, about how do we solve this problem? And the bottom line is this: when men are allowed to just do what their flesh calls them to do, and women are following their flesh, you end up with a society where men never grow up and women don't need them. In fact, write this down. This is some current research. Men are tempted to perpetual adolescence, particularly if women enable it, and women are tempted to equally give themselves to immature losers or to give up on men completely. Okay, I've talked about all these temptations, and there's some bad things in there. Hopefully you don't feel I'm saying that you are that way. What I want to say, though, here at the very end, is that if you were paying attention, you might have seen some of this. But if the women conquer their temptations, the men are forced to conquer theirs. And if the men conquer their temptations, the women are forced to conquer theirs. If a man stops treating women as objects, she will lose the ability to manipulate him with how she dresses. If a man decides he's going to lead according to God's will, then a woman will find it easy to follow. The genders in our world today are broken because flesh is broken. But the solution is that guys can heal girls and girls can heal guys if we each just did what God was calling us to do, not what our flesh is drawing us to do. And the end result is not, I'm doing my thing and you're doing your thing. The end result is harmony. Write this down for the very end. It says this: by living according to these principles, you defeat your own flesh and work to heal the world around you. I want to call you men to live as men. And I want to call you women to live as women. And you women will heal the men around you, and you men will heal the women around you. And together, we will grow closer to God. I want to show you one final thing. I know I'm kind of running a little bit late, but I want to show you one final thing. I've got this keyboard out here because I think the best analogy for how God designed men and women to work is this word harmony. So I want to show you something. I've been practicing this for weeks. Yeah, that's called melody, okay? Melody is the note that lets the other notes play in the playground. Melody is the note that creates the framework that everything else works on. Melody is the thing you recognize. Melody is the thing that makes sense and it takes the lead. And melody is good. Melody makes a lot of sense all by itself. But harmony is even better. Let's see if I can do this, okay? Okay? Not too bad. Thank you very much. Okay. But we're not done yet. Because, see, you can have harmony with just two notes. You don't need to have a whole bunch of notes. You can have harmony with just two notes. If I just do, that's fine. But if I add another note to it, somehow it's richer and more beautiful. There There we go. There we go. It's usually beautiful. So you get two notes and you get something. But if you know anything about music theory, you know that I kept the melody on the top, which is really important. If I flip the order, then it gets really weird. If I put the melody on the bottom, you can sometimes still hear it, but it doesn't make the right kind of sense. You know, it's there, but it just doesn't make the right kind of sense. God wired us in such a way that when you get two, one needs to be the melody and one needs to be the harmony. And when you get two, one needs to lead, one needs to follow. Both make beauty, but they each need to play their own unique roles. One last thing I want to show you. In Genesis chapter 3, the guy and the girl make mistakes. They screw up, they make a big mistake. They do the one thing God asked them not to do. And when the two genders don't work the way they should, you get something called dissonance. This right here, hang on. You know what that is? That is called the tritone, and it is the most evil sound in all of history. It is illegal in the Middle Ages to play this note combination in a church, like I'm doing right now. Okay? I'm not even joking with you. That was literally not allowed in any church context. I think that's pretty ugly, but I think this one is even uglier. You know? Just like, what's going on there? Okay, I'm going to leave this going. Tell me which note is wrong. Is this one? This one? No, it's together they're wrong. But you can't tell which one is wrong. What happens is that in Adam and Eve's situation, when they did that, when they sinned, they turned on each other and they blamed each other. And she said, he's wrong. And he said, she's wrong. And you don't know who's wrong. Because if you're going to have something wrong and you only got two, you've got no authority to base it on. But check it out. If I just add one extra note, is this one? That one's a nice one. That's the weird one. Remove the bad one and it all sounds good. Remove the good one, it still sounds weird. What you got going on here is that you need a foundation. Genders make no sense unless we start with the foundation of God. That third component needs to set the framework so that the rest of it makes sense. And then if you get the foundation down, and you get the melody in the right place, and you got the harmony filling in where it needs to be, the harmony adds the beauty and the richness